The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as Ambassador Velcris stepped up to the central platform. His 4 arms gestured smoothly across the holographic display, bringing up a map that every member knew well. It showed a dark patch of space marked with red warning symbols. Sector 7 Terra, the Dead Zone. 3,000 years, Velcris announced, his voice echoing through the massive room. 3,000 years since the quarantine was established. I am pleased to report that all containment measures remain effective. No vessels have attempted to breach the barrier. No signals have emerged from within. The assembled representatives from 847 species nodded in approval. Some looked bored. This was the same report they heard every year. The Dead Zone was dead. It would always be dead. Velcris continued his presentation, listing the standard data about radiation levels, spatial anomalies, and the automated defense platforms that ringed the entire sector. Everything was normal. Everything was as it should be. Then a young scientist named Thera Lynn raised her hand. She was new to the council, representing a species that had only joined 50 years ago. Her skin shimmered with nervous color changes as she spoke. Ambassador, I have a question about the sensor data from Quadrant 7. Velcris frowned. No one asked questions during his annual report. What about it? There are electromagnetic patterns in the data. Organized patterns. They repeat every 47 cycles. Thera Lynn projected her own analysis onto the shared displays. These aren't natural phenomena. These are signals. The chamber erupted into noise. Representatives began talking all at once. Some laughed. Others shouted that this was impossible. Elder Counselor Prathuk, an ancient being whose species had been council members for over 6,000 years, raised one withered hand for silence. Young scientist, you are new here. You do not understand. Nothing lives in the Dead Zone. Nothing can live there. What you're seeing is probably just echoes from the old colonies. Automated systems still running on dead worlds. But Elder, Thera Lynn insisted, I've analyzed those patterns. They're not old broadcasts. They're new, and they're getting stronger. Velcris deactivated her display with a sharp gesture. This council made its decision 3 millennia ago. The Dead Zone is forbidden. We do not investigate it. We do not discuss it. And we certainly do not spread panic based on sensor ghosts. The meeting moved on to other topics. Trade agreements, border disputes, resource allocation. The Dead Zone was forgotten again, just as it always was. But after the session ended, a merchant captain named Raxul approached Thera Lynn in one of the station's many corridors. He was a rough-looking individual, his scales scarred from years of dangerous trade routes. I heard what you said in there, Raxul whispered, looking around to make sure no one was listening. About the signals. They dismissed me, Thera Lynn said sadly. No one wants to listen. I'll listen. Raxul pulled out a data chip from his pocket. 5 years ago, I did something stupid. I sent a probe into the Dead Zone. It was expensive and illegal and probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. Thera Lynn's eyes widened. You what? The probe never came back. But before I lost contact, it sent me some data. Fragments, images. He pressed the chip into her hand. I've never shown this to anyone. The council would throw me in detention for breaking quarantine regulations. But you need to see this. That night, in her small quarters, Thera Lynn loaded the data chip. The images were corrupted, broken into pieces by radiation and distance. But what she could see made her hearts beat faster. Structures. Massive structures in orbit around a blue and green planet. She enhanced the images as much as she could. The structures weren't natural. They were built, constructed, and they were huge, larger than any space station the Council had ever created. There was more. Fragmentary data showed what looked like cities on the planet's surface, lights covering entire continents, energy signatures that didn't match any known technology. Something was alive in the Dead Zone. Something had survived. Thera Lynn wanted to take this to the Council immediately, but she remembered how they had dismissed her earlier. They wouldn't believe her. They would accuse her of fabricating evidence. Or worse, they would learn about Raxul's illegal probe and punish them both. She spent months analyzing the data in secret, checking and rechecking her findings. The more she looked, the more certain she became. Whatever was in Sector 7 Terra wasn't just surviving. It was thriving. But there was nothing she could do. The Council had made its laws clear. The Dead Zone was forbidden. Anyone who entered would be considered lost. Any ship that approached would be turned away by the automated defenses. Therilyn decided to wait. She continued her normal work, studying radiation patterns and spatial anomalies. But every day she checked the sensors pointed at the dead zone. The signals were still there, still growing stronger. She wasn't sure what she was waiting for. Maybe for someone else to notice. Maybe for the signals to become so strong that the council couldn't ignore them anymore. She didn't have to wait long. 6 months after her presentation to the council, Therilyn was working late in her laboratory when alarms began to sound throughout the station. Emergency alerts flashed on every screen. Her communicator buzzed with an urgent summons. All council members were ordered to the chamber immediately. When she arrived, the room was in chaos. Security Chief Corval stood at the central display, his expression grim. The map of the dead zone was displayed, but something was different. The red warning markers at the edge of the sector were disappearing one by one. 12 quarantine buoys have gone offline, Corval announced. Complete communication loss. We've also lost contact with 30 automated defense platforms. They're not damaged or destroyed. They're just gone. What could cause this? Asked Ambassador Velcris. I don't know. We're sending investigative vessels now, but they won't arrive for several hours. Corval zoomed in on the sector boundary. But there's something else. Something strange. He played a recording from one of the last buoys before it went dark. The audio was mostly static, but through the noise, Therilyn could hear something. A voice, no, many voices, speaking in languages she didn't recognize. And then, just before the recording ended, a single clear phrase in perfect galactic common. We're coming home. The chamber fell into absolute silence. Everyone stared at the display, at the dark sector that had been quiet for 3,000 years. Something was coming. Something from the dead zone, and none of them were ready for it. Elder Prathik stood slowly, his old bones creaking. Activate all defense fleets. Maximum alert status. If something is coming out of that sector, we must be prepared to contain it. But as military orders were issued and ships began to mobilize, Therilyn looked at the data and felt a strange certainty settle over her. Whatever was coming, it wouldn't be stopped by their defenses. Whatever had survived in that impossible hellscape for 3,000 years had become something far beyond their understanding. The dead zone wasn't dead anymore, and soon, everyone would know it. Station Gamma 9 sat at the edge of civilized space, a lonely outpost that marked the boundary between the Galactic Council's territory and the forbidden regions beyond. Commander Taemin had served there for 12 years, and in all that time, nothing interesting had ever happened. Until today. Commander, we have an anomaly, reported his sensor officer, her tentacles twitching nervously over her console. Something just appeared on our scanners. Grid 77 Alpha. Taemin looked at his own display and felt his stomach drop. There was a ship. A massive ship. Larger than any civilian vessel and shaped unlike anything he'd ever seen. It hadn't come through any of the standard jump points. It had simply appeared as if it had been there all along and someone had just turned on its lights. Identify that vessel, Taemin ordered, trying to keep his voice steady, and raise our shields. Deploy defense drones. The communications officer worked frantically at his station. Sir, the ship is transmitting. It's broadcasting on every known frequency simultaneously. I'm getting signals in 73 different languages. Put it through. A voice filled the command center. It was calm, professional, and speaking in perfect galactic common with just a slight accent that Taemin couldn't place. This is the UNS Perseverance. We are humanity. We understand we were believed extinct. We're here to correct that assumption. We request diplomatic audience with the Galactic Council. Please respond. The command center fell silent. Everyone stared at the speakers as if the voice might explain itself further. But there was nothing more, just a patient waiting. Did they say humanity? Whispered the sensor officer. But that's impossible. The dead zone. Taemin's hands shook as he activated his communicator. This is Station Gamma 9 to Council Command. We have a situation. Priority Alpha. A vessel claiming to be from the quarantine sector has just appeared in our space. They call themselves human, requesting immediate instructions. The response came faster than he'd expected. Within minutes, every screen in the command center lit up with override codes. Admiral Rixakar's face appeared, his expression grave. Commander Taemin, you are to maintain position and monitor the vessel. Do not engage. Do not approach. Under no circumstances are you to allow that ship to proceed further into Council space. Multiple defense fleets are being mobilized to your location. Hold your position until they arrive. Understood, Admiral. But sir, what are my orders if the vessel attempts to leave? There was a long pause. Track it. That's all you can do. If our intelligence is correct, your weapons won't harm it anyway. The communication ended, leaving Taemin staring at his crew in confusion. What did the Admiral mean by that? On the main display, the strange ship waited patiently. It made no aggressive moves. It didn't power up weapons or prepare for combat. It simply existed there like a mountain that had suddenly decided to float in space. Taemin opened a channel. Unknown vessel Perseverance, this is Station Gamma 9. Please maintain your current position. Council representatives are en route to speak with you. Understood, Station Gamma 9. The calm voice replied. We will wait. We've waited 3,000 years. A few more hours won't matter. Over the next 6 hours, Taemin watched as more ships appeared. Not human ships, but Council vessels. Dozens of them. Cruisers, battleships, carrier groups. They formed a massive perimeter around the human vessel, weapons charged and ready. But the Perseverance didn't react. It sat there in the center of all that firepower, peaceful and unconcerned. Finally, a diplomatic transport approached. Taemin recognized the insignia. Ambassador Velcris and his delegation were aboard. They would conduct the first official contact with these impossible visitors from the dead zone. Human vessel Perseverance, this is Ambassador Velcris of the Galactic Council. We are prepared to discuss your situation. Please prepare to receive our delegation. Negative, Ambassador, the human voice replied. We will send a delegation to you. Our shuttle will arrive in 5 minutes. Before Velcris could protest, a small craft detached from the Perseverance. It moved with perfect precision, gliding between the Council warships as if they weren't there. Every weapon tracked it, but no one fired. Not yet. The shuttle docked with the diplomatic transport, and Taemin switched his display to the internal cameras. He wanted to see what these humans looked like. The airlock opened, and 4 figures stepped through. They were bipedal, roughly the same size as many Council species. They wore dark blue uniforms with strange insignia on their shoulders. But what struck Taemin most was how ordinary they appeared. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. No visible weapons. No obvious mutations from 3,000 years of deadly radiation. The leader, a woman with short dark hair, stepped forward and bowed slightly. I am Captain Haewon of the United Nations Stellar Fleet. This is Chief Engineer Sang-ho, Xenobiologist Miran, and Strategic Advisor Daejung. Thank you for meeting with us. Ambassador Velcris stood frozen for a moment before remembering his diplomatic training. Captain Haewon, your appearance here has caused considerable concern. The Council believed your species extinct. We're aware, Haewon said with a small smile. We've been monitoring Council communications for the past 200 years. We know what you think happened to us. 200 years? Velcris's voice rose slightly. You've been watching us for 2 centuries and said nothing? We weren't ready before. Now we are. Haewon gestured to her science officer. Miran activated a holographic display showing images of Earth, of massive orbital structures, of cities that glittered with lights. We survived the Forerunner weapon detonation, Miran explained in simple terms. It should have killed us. Instead, it changed us, changed our world. We adapted. We evolved. We built a new civilization in the radiation and chaos. Impossible, Velcris breathed. No species could survive that level of contamination. We're standing here, Ambassador, Daejung said quietly. We're the proof. Engineer Sang-ho pulled up more data. Earth's current population is 47 billion. We have 12 fully developed colony worlds within what you call the dead zone. Our industrial capacity exceeds the Council's entire output by a factor of 10. The numbers seemed absurd. Taemin watched from his station. As the ambassador's face went through several shades of color, none of them healthy. You must understand, Velcris said carefully. The Council has laws, protocols. We cannot simply acknowledge your existence and grant you immediate membership. There are procedures. We understand bureaucracy, Ambassador, Haewon replied. We invented half of ours from watching yours. But we're not asking for membership yet. We're simply announcing our presence. The quarantine is over. Humanity is returning to galactic society. The Council must vote on this. We must study you, Understand what you've become. For all we know, you could be hostile, dangerous. The radiation could have affected your minds, your biology in ways that threaten other species. We expected this response. HFY remained calm. We're willing to undergo any reasonable tests or examinations. But understand, Ambassador, we're not asking permission to exist. We're informing you that we do. Whether the Council acknowledges us or not, we're here. We're real. And we're not going away. Velcris looked at his security detail, then back at the humans. I will convey your message to the Council. But I must warn you, there will be resistance. Many species will fear you. Some will want you returned to quarantine, by force if necessary. Captain HFY's smile didn't waver, but her eyes grew colder. You're welcome to try, Ambassador. But I should inform you that the Perseverance isn't alone. We have 30 more vessels waiting in formation just beyond your sensor range, and each one is significantly more advanced than this diplomatic ship. Are you threatening us? No. HFY's voice was firm. We're stating facts. We don't want conflict. We want cooperation, but we won't be imprisoned again. We won't hide anymore. The galaxy needs to understand that humanity survived, adapted, and thrived. Now we're back, and everything is about to change. The meeting ended shortly after. The human delegation returned to their shuttle and departed peacefully. But as Taman watched the Perseverance sitting in space, surrounded by dozens of warships that suddenly seemed inadequate, he understood something profound. The dead zone had never been dead. It had been sleeping, and now it had awakened. The council chamber had never been so crowded. Representatives from all 847 member species filled every seat, and more watched through holographic connections from their home worlds. Security officers lined the walls, their weapons ready, even though every scan had confirmed the human delegation was unarmed. Captain HFY stood in the center of the chamber with her 3 officers. She looked remarkably calm for someone facing nearly 1,000 alien species, many of whom wanted her detained or destroyed. Elder Counselor Prathik called the session to order with a strike of his ceremonial staff. This council recognizes the delegation from the species calling themselves humans. Captain HFY, you claim to have survived in Sector 7 Terra for 3,000 years. This council requires proof. We require explanation, and we require assurances that you pose no threat to galactic peace. Of course, Elder, HFY replied respectfully. We're here to provide all of that. Xenobiologist Miran will begin with the scientific explanation of our survival. Miran stepped forward, activating a holographic display. She spoke clearly, using simple terms that everyone could understand. 3,000 years ago, a Forerunner weapon detonated in our solar system. The Council's records show it as a catastrophic failure that destroyed everything within 50 light years. But those records are incomplete. She showed images of Earth immediately after the explosion. The planet was covered in strange glowing clouds, radiation levels that would kill most species in seconds. The weapon didn't destroy Earth, it transformed it. The exotic radiation it released was unlike anything in nature. It rewrote physics in our solar system. Surely you couldn't survive such conditions, interrupted Ambassador Velcris. No carbon-based life could. You're right, Miran agreed. We couldn't, not at first. 97% of humanity died in the first year. But the 3% who survived carried genetic mutations that let them process the exotic radiation, not just resist it, but use it. The hologram shifted to show human DNA, with sections highlighted in blue. Over generations, natural selection and adaptation turned us into a species that doesn't just tolerate the radiation. We need it. It's part of our biology now. Without it, we would die. A ripple of concern went through the chamber. Several species began whispering urgently to each other. Are you saying you're contagious? Demanded Security Chief Corval. That you could spread this contamination to other species? No, Miran said firmly. The exotic radiation doesn't leave our solar system. The Forerunner weapon created a contained field. We're perfectly safe to interact with. We've spent 200 years analyzing this to be certain. Chief Engineer Sang Ho took over the presentation. While we were adapting biologically, we were also reverse engineering Forerunner technology. We found remnants of their civilization on Mars, Europa, and several outer planets. It took us 1,000 years to understand even the basics, but once we did, our technological progress accelerated rapidly. He displayed images of human cities, orbital stations, and industrial complexes. We achieved fusion power 1,800 years ago, antimatter containment 1,200 years ago. Post-scarcity economics 1,000 years ago, and 200 years ago we developed quantum displacement drives that let us travel instantaneously without jump gates. The chamber erupted in protests. Several counselors stood up, shouting that this was impossible. Jump gates were the only known method of faster-than-light travel. They'd been developed by the ancient forerunners and barely understood even now. "I don't believe you," stated technological assessor Venthar, a being whose species specialized in advanced engineering. "Prove it. Show us this technology," Sang-Ho smiled. "Gladly. Please observe your sensor displays." Every screen in the chamber flickered. The exterior cameras showed the space around the council station. The human ship Perseverance was visible, floating peacefully in the distance, and then it vanished. One instant it was there. The next it was gone. No energy signature, no spatial distortion, nothing. Just gone. Alarms blared. Security went to high alert. Counselors jumped from their seats in panic. "Where did it go?" shouted Korval. "Scan the entire sector. Find that ship." "We're right here," Sang-Ho said calmly. The cameras showed the Perseverance reappearing now on the opposite side of the station. It had crossed 50,000 kilometers in zero time, with no visible means of propulsion. "That's not possible," Venthar whispered. "The energy requirements alone would require more power than a star." "For your technology, yes," Sang-Ho agreed. "But we don't use your technology. We use the exotic radiation as a power source. We've effectively turned the death of our solar system into an infinite energy supply." Strategic Advisor Dae-Jung stepped forward. "Now you understand why we remained hidden for so long. We knew that revealing ourselves prematurely would cause panic. We needed to be strong enough that no one would try to imprison us or study us like laboratory animals. Strong enough that we could demand respect as equals." "Equals?" Elder Prathuk's voice dripped with disdain. "You speak as if you're our peers. But you're a single species with a handful of worlds. The Council represents nearly 1,000 species and controls half the galaxy." "True," Dae-Jung acknowledged. "But let me show you something else." The hologram changed to show tactical data, fleet compositions, military readiness assessments, economic projections, information that should have been classified and secured. "We've been monitoring your communications for 2 centuries, Dae-Jung explained. "We know your fleet strengths, your strategic weaknesses, your political divisions. We know which species are loyal to the Council, and which are considering independence. We know about the border conflicts in Sectors 12 and 19 that you've been keeping quiet. We know about the economic crisis brewing in the core worlds." Ambassador Velcris stood up, his forearms shaking with anger. "This is espionage. This is an act of war." "No," Haewon cut in, her voice sharp. "This is survival. We needed to know if the galaxy was safe before revealing ourselves. And what we learned?" She paused, her expression growing dark. "We learned that you're in danger." "All of you," the chamber fell silent. "What danger?" asked Theralin, the young scientist who had first detected human signals. Dae-Jung brought up new data. Long-range sensor readings showing something massive approaching from outside the galaxy. "We call it the Void Swarm. A collection of organic vessels, planet-sized organisms that consume entire worlds for energy. Your historical records call it by other names. The Great Hunger. The Dark Fleet, the end of cycles." "That's a myth," protested Elder Prathuk. "A legend the Forerunners used to scare primitive species into cooperation." "It's not a myth," Miran said quietly. "We have sensor data. Clear, irrefutable data. The Void Swarm is real and it's returning. It last appeared 5,000 years ago. The Forerunners defeated it, but at terrible cost. They nearly went extinct fighting it. And then they disappeared shortly after, either dead or transcended to another plane of existence." She projected an estimate onto the screens. "Based on current trajectories, the Void Swarm will reach Council space in approximately 14 months. Maybe less." The entire chamber erupted into chaos. Counselors shouted at each other. Some called the humans liars. Others demanded immediate military mobilization. Still others insisted this was a trick to make the Council lower its guard. Captain Haewon waited for the noise to die down. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the confusion like a blade. "This is why we emerged now. Not to conquer you. Not to threaten you. But to warn you. And to offer our help. We've spent 3,000 years becoming strong enough to survive anything. Now we want to use that strength to help others survive." "And what's your price?" asked Counselor Rixakar, a cynical old being who'd seen countless civilizations rise and fall. "What do you want in exchange for this generous assistance?" "Recognition," Haywan said simply. "A seat on this council. Equal voting rights. The same treatment you'd give any member species." "Never," spat Elder Prathik. "You're dangerous, unknown. You could be lying about everything." "We could be," Haywan agreed. "But we're not. And you're going to realize that very soon. Because whether you grant us council membership or not, we're staying. We're going to fight the Void Swarm. And when we save your civilizations from extinction, you're going to understand what we've been trying to tell you all along." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many counselors as she could. "We're not your enemies. We're not monsters. We're survivors. And now, whether you like it or not, we're your best hope." The vote was called 3 days later. It was the closest vote in council history. 438 species voted to accept humanity as members. 409 voted against. Humanity had a seat on the council. But as Captain Haywan sat in her new position, she could feel the fear and resentment radiating from dozens of species around her. They'd voted for survival, not friendship. That was fine. Humanity had learned long ago that respect mattered more than affection, and respect they were about to earn. The weeks following humanity's admission to the council were tense. Young Jay, Earth's newly appointed permanent representative, found himself facing hostility everywhere he went on Prime Station. Other species would cross corridors to avoid him. Meetings were scheduled and then mysteriously canceled. Diplomatic invitations never arrived. But young Jay had expected this. Humanity hadn't survived 3,000 years by being naive. They knew fear when they saw it, and the council was terrified. The opposition was led by General Kornak, Supreme Commander of the Council's military forces. He was a veteran of 100 conflicts, a strategic genius whose species had evolved for warfare, and he hated the humans with a passion that surprised even his fellow officers. "They're abominations," Kornak declared at a private military council. "Mutations created by radiation that should have killed them. We cannot trust them. We cannot allow them to remain free." Admiral Rixakar, who had voted against human membership, nevertheless disagreed. "They saved Station Gamma 9 last week when that reactor core went critical. They had technology that could stabilize it when ours failed." "A trick," Kornak insisted. "They probably caused the problem in the first place, just so they could solve it and make themselves look good." But there was no evidence of sabotage. The investigation showed a simple mechanical failure, the kind that happened occasionally in any complex system. The humans had simply been nearby and helped. Still, incidents began to multiply. A human shuttle was denied docking clearance at 3 stations before finally being allowed to land. Human diplomatic pouches were accidentally opened and searched. Trading vessels from Earth found themselves subject to inspection after inspection. The worst incident came when a group of human scientists were attacked in a station marketplace. Young Jay watched the security footage with cold fury. 5 humans, including xenobiologist Miran, had been surrounded by a mob from 3 different species. They'd been accused of being spies, monsters, threats to galactic peace. The humans hadn't fought back. They'd simply formed a defensive circle and waited for station security to arrive, but the mob had gotten in several blows before the guards intervened. "This is unacceptable," Young Jay stated at the emergency council session called to address the incident. "My people came here in peace. We've offered our assistance, our technology, our friendship, and we're being rewarded with violence. Your people shouldn't have been there," Elder Prathik said coldly. "That station has the right to restrict access to certain areas. The marketplace is public," Young Jay shot back. "Unless the council is admitting that humans don't have the same rights as other species?" The chamber fell uncomfortably silent. They couldn't admit that, not officially. But everyone knew it was true. That night, Captain Haywan called an emergency meeting with her officers. "It's worse than we thought," she said. "The council is fracturing. Kornak has convinced almost 200 species to support him. They want us detained pending a full investigation of our technology and biology. They want to cut us open and see what makes us tick," said Engineer Sang-ho bluntly, "like we're laboratory specimens." "Can they actually arrest us?" asked Miran, still nursing bruises from the marketplace attack. "They can try," Strategic Advisor Dae-jung answered. "But we won't let them. The question is, how far are we willing to go to resist?" The answer came 2 days later. Security Chief Korval arrived at the human delegation's quarters with 20 armed guards. He held up an official council warrant. By order of the Grand Council, all human personnel are to be detained pending investigation. You will come with us peacefully, or we will use force. Young Jay stood in the doorway looking at the weapons pointed at him. Behind him he could feel his staff tensing, ready for action. This is a violation of council law, Young Jay said calmly. We have diplomatic immunity. We are recognized members. Your membership is under review, Korval replied. The vote was close. Many believe it was a mistake. Until the investigation is complete, you will be held in secure facilities. Secure facilities, Young Jay repeated. You mean prison? Comfortable prison? You'll be treated well, but you cannot be allowed to move freely while there are so many questions about your nature. Young Jay looked at Korval for a long moment. Then he sighed. I'm sorry you chose this path. I'm just following orders, I know. Young Jay pulled out a small device from his pocket. It was barely larger than his thumb, made of a crystalline material that seemed to glow with internal light. Engineer Sangho, would you like to demonstrate our position on being detained? Sangho stepped forward with a sad smile. He'd been hoping it wouldn't come to this, but he'd been prepared. Of course, Ambassador. He activated the device. Every weapon in the corridor simply fell apart. The guards' rifles dissolved into component atoms, separating into neat piles of sorted elements. Carbon, iron, silicon. The metals clinked as they hit the floor. The plastics formed small puddles. The guards stared at their empty hands in shock. What did you do? Korval's voice rose to a shout. What did you do to our weapons? Molecular disassembly, Sangho explained conversationally. We simply told the atoms to stop being rifles and to become their base elements instead. No harm done. We can reverse it if you'd like. He waved the device again. The piles of material flowed back together, but instead of forming weapons, they became flowers. Beautiful crystalline flowers that glowed with soft rainbow colors. Consider these a gift, Sangho said, handing one to a stunned guard. To show we mean no harm? Korval backed away, his eyes wide. You're monsters. Just as Kornak said. You have weapons that can destroy anything. We have technology, Young Jay corrected. Technology far beyond yours. But we're not using it to attack you. We're using it to defend ourselves. There's a difference. He walked forward and the guards parted before him without thinking. You need to understand something, Security Chief. You can't imprison us. You can't kill us. You can't force us to do anything. We are stronger than you in every way that matters. But we don't want to be your enemies. We want to be your allies. Why? Korval's voice was barely a whisper. If you're so powerful, why do you need the council at all? Because strength isn't everything, Young Jay replied. We learned that the hard way. 3,000 years alone taught us that isolation is its own kind of death. We don't want to be alone anymore. We want to be part of something larger than ourselves. News of the incident spread throughout the council within hours. The reaction was immediate and split right down the middle. General Kornak demanded immediate military action. They've assaulted council security forces. This is an act of war. But Ambassador Theralin, who had become humanity's strongest supporter, argued back. They defended themselves non-lethally against an illegal arrest. And they gave the guards flowers. If that's an act of war, we need to rewrite our definitions. The debate raged for days. Emergency sessions were called. Alliances shifted. Species that had voted against humanity began to reconsider. Species that had supported them started having doubts. Through it all, the human delegation remained in their quarters, making no aggressive moves but also making it clear they wouldn't be taken into custody. Finally, Elder Prathik called for a direct meeting between humanity and the military leadership. It was held in a neutral conference room, with representatives from both sides and extensive security monitoring. General Kornak stood across the table from Captain Haywan. He was nearly twice her size, covered in battle scars and radiating barely controlled fury. You've made your point, he growled. You're powerful, but power without restraint is tyranny. How do we know you won't use this technology to conquer us? Haywan met his eyes without flinching. Because we've had the ability to conquer you for 200 years and we haven't. Because we could have simply taken over the council instead of asking for membership. Because if we wanted to rule the galaxy, we'd already be doing it. Then what do you want? To not be alone anymore. Her voice softened. To have friends, allies, partners. We survived extinction, General. We built a civilization from ruins. But survival isn't living. We want to live. We want to be part of something bigger. And we want to use our strength to protect others the way we couldn't protect ourselves 3,000 years ago. Cornac stared at her for a long time. Finally, he sat down heavily. I still don't trust you. That's fair, Haywan acknowledged. Trust is earned. Give us time to earn it. The compromise was reached the next day. Humanity would remain on the council. They would not be detained or investigated, but they would also provide regular technological briefings to the council's science division and accept observers on human ships. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. Young Jay stood in the observation deck watching ships come and go from the station. Beside him, Ambassador Theralyn looked at the same view. Do you think this will work? She asked. I don't know, Young Jay admitted, but we have to try, because if we can't learn to work together now, we have no chance when the Void Swarm arrives. In the darkness of space beyond the station, something ancient and hungry was drawing closer. The council didn't know it yet, but time was running out. 4 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council. The initial hostility had begun to fade into wary cooperation. Human engineers worked alongside council technicians to upgrade defense systems. Human scientists shared medical advances that were saving lives across 100 worlds. Young Jay sat in his council seat during the weekly session, reviewing reports on the joint projects. Progress was slow but steady. Some species still refused to work with humans, but others were beginning to see the benefits. On Earth, Commander Bo-Ra was training mixed-species military units at the Stellar Defense Academy. She'd requested this assignment specifically. If the Void Swarm was coming, the galaxy needed to be ready, and that meant teaching Council forces how to fight like humans. The key to human tactics, she explained to a class of alien officers, is adaptation. We don't have one strategy. We have 1,000 strategies, and we choose based on the enemy's weaknesses. We don't fight fair. We fight to win. The alien officers looked uncomfortable. Many species had strict codes of combat honor. The idea of deliberately exploiting weaknesses felt wrong to them. Honor is nice, Bo-Ra said bluntly, but dead heroes protect no one. When the Void Swarm comes, you won't have time for honor. You'll have time for survival. That's what I'm teaching you. Back on Prime Station, Ambassador Theralyn was working with human scientists to upgrade the long-range sensor network. She'd become humanity's closest ally on the Council, the bridge between their two civilizations. I'm getting strange readings from Sector 15, she reported to Young Jay one evening. Could be sensor drift, but Young Jay pulled up the data. His expression went dark. That's not sensor drift. Contact Captain Haywan immediately. Within an hour, the Perseverance was moving toward Sector 15 at maximum speed. Haywan stood on the bridge watching the sensor data with growing concern. Confirm readings, she ordered. Engineer Sang-Ho checked his instruments 3 times. Confirmed. Void Swarm biomass detected. Multiple signatures. They're at the edge of Sector 15 near the colony world Praxis 7. How many? Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. And they're moving fast. Haywan activated the Emergency Council channel. This is Captain Haywan to Prime Station. The Void Swarm has arrived. They're 6 months early. We need immediate military mobilization to Sector 15. The response came from General Cornac, who'd been placed in charge of the defense preparations. Despite his earlier hostility to humans, he'd taken the Void Swarm threat seriously. We're scrambling everything we have. How long until they reach Praxis 7? 8 hours. Maybe less. We can't get sufficient forces there in time. That colony has 12 billion inhabitants. Then we go alone, Haywan decided. Navigator, plot intercept course. Communications, get me the other human ships. All of them. Within minutes, 41 human vessels changed course toward Sector 15. They moved faster than Council ships could track, their quantum displacement drives allowing them to cross vast distances almost instantly. The residents of Praxis 7 watched in terror as their sky began to darken. The Void Swarm arrived like a living storm. Thousands of massive organic ships that blotted out the stars. Each one was the size of a small moon, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. The colony's defense fleet moved to intercept. 50 warships, the best the Council could afford for a border world. They opened fire with plasma cannons, missile batteries, and energy weapons. The weapons hit their targets. They burned into the organic hulls of the swarm ships and did nothing. The swarm creatures didn't even slow down. They absorbed the energy and kept coming. Tendrils extended from the lead creatures, wrapping around council ships and crushing them like insects. "All ships fall back," ordered the colony's defense commander. "We can't stop them. Evacuate the planet. Everyone evacuate now." But there wasn't time. The swarm was moving too fast. Within an hour, they'd be in orbit. Within 2, they'd begin consuming the planet. Then the human ships arrived. The Perseverance and its sister vessels dropped out of quantum space directly between the swarm and Praxis 7. They didn't form a traditional battle line. Instead, they scattered in a seemingly random pattern. "All ships activate radiation projectors," Haywan commanded. Full power. The human vessels began to glow. Bright, painful light that hurt to look at. But it wasn't just light. It was exotic radiation, the same energy that had transformed humanity 3,000 years ago. The void swarm creatures recoiled. Their bioluminescence flickered. They tried to change course to avoid the radiation field, but the human ships moved with them, maintaining the barrier. And then the radiation began to change the swarm creatures themselves. Engineer Sang-ho monitored the readings carefully. Molecular destabilization beginning. The exotic radiation is breaking down their organic structures at the cellular level. On the planet below, billions of people watched as the terrible dark shapes in their sky began to dissolve. The swarm creatures twisted and writhed, their bodies coming apart like paper in fire. They didn't explode. They simply ceased to exist, breaking down into clouds of harmless organic compounds that dispersed into space. The battle lasted 7 hours. Wave after wave of swarm creatures emerged from deep space, and wave after wave was destroyed by the human radiation barriers. The Council defense fleet that had been forced to retreat watched in amazement as the humans fought with a precision and efficiency they'd never witnessed. Finally, the last swarm creature dissolved into nothing. The sky above Praxis 7 cleared. The stars were visible again. Captain Haywan slumped in her command chair, exhausted. "Damage report. Minor hull stress on 12 vessels," reported her tactical officer. "No serious damage. No casualties. And the colony? Safe. Completely safe." On Praxis 7, the colonists poured into the streets. Spontaneous celebrations erupted in every city. The humans had saved them. The monsters from the dead zone had become their protectors. News of the battle spread across the Council faster than any ship could travel. Within hours, every species knew what had happened. Humanity had faced the Void Swarm, the ancient terror that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization, and won without losing a single ship. The emergency council session was chaotic. Representatives shouted over each other, trying to be heard. General Koronach stood and silence fell. Everyone knew his position on humanity. Everyone expected him to downplay their achievement or find some way to criticize them. Instead, he did something that shocked the entire chamber. He bowed, a deep, formal bow that indicated absolute respect in his culture. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I believed humans were dangerous. I believed they should be contained or controlled. I was wrong. They saved 12 billion lives today, lives that would have been lost if we'd been alone. I propose we formally redesignate Sector 7 Terra as human sovereign space. And I propose we accept humanity not just as members, but as full partners in galactic defense." The vote was immediate and unanimous. Young Jay accepted the honor with quiet dignity. But afterward, he found Ambassador Theralyn in one of the station's observation decks. "We did it," she said softly. "We proved you're not monsters, did we?" Young Jay looked out at the stars. "We dissolved thousands of living creatures. We killed them with the same radiation that created us. We're still monsters, Thera. We're just monsters that fight for the right side. Is that how you see yourselves? It's how we survived." He pulled up a classified report on his data pad. "This was just the vanguard, Thera, a scouting force. The main swarm fleet is still coming. Everything we fought today was maybe 1% of what's out there." Theralyn felt her heart sink. 1%? But we barely stopped this attack. We didn't barely stop it. We stopped it easily. That's the point. Young Jay turned to face her. The Council couldn't have stopped even this small force. But we did. And when the main fleet arrives, we'll stop that too. But we can't do it alone. We need the Council. We need everyone working together. You really think we can win? I know we can. Because humanity has already survived the impossible once. We're very good at it. He smiled slightly. But we'd rather not have to do it alone again. That's why we came back. That's why we revealed ourselves. Not because we needed the Council. Because the Council needs us, and because we'd rather fight together than die alone. Deep in human space on Earth itself, Engineer Sang Ho and scientist Miran reviewed the classified data in a secure facility. The data that showed the true size of the Void Swarm. The data that showed how little time they really had. 5 years, Miran said quietly. Maybe 10 if we're lucky. That's when the main fleet arrives. Then we have 5 years to prepare. Sang Ho looked at the tactical projections. 5 years to turn the Council from a loose alliance into a unified fighting force. 5 years to share everything we know. 5 years to make sure everyone survives. Like, can it be done? It has to be done. He closed the file. We've spent 3,000 years preparing for this. 3,000 years developing technology, building strength, learning to fight impossible odds. We thought we were preparing to survive alone, but maybe we were preparing to help everyone else survive too. Miran looked at him. You really believe that? That everything we went through was for this purpose? I don't know about purpose, but I know about opportunity. We have the chance to save billions of lives, trillions of lives. That's worth any price. On Prime Station, young Jay stood before the full Council assembly. Representatives from 847 species watched as humanity's ambassador spoke. Today, we proved that humanity can be trusted, that we fight for life, not for conquest, that we use our power to protect, not to dominate. But this is just the beginning. The real test is still coming, and when it arrives, we'll need every species, every ship, every person working together, not as humans and aliens, not as Council members and newcomers, but as one united galactic civilization. He paused, looking around at the assembled faces. 3,000 years ago, humanity was nearly destroyed. We survived in isolation, building our strength in the darkness. Today we emerge into the light, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as partners. The Void Swarm is coming, but we'll be ready. Because we're not alone anymore, none of us are. The chamber erupted in applause. Even Elder Prathik, who had opposed humanity from the start, nodded slowly in approval. The dead zone was empty now. The quarantine was lifted. Humanity had returned to the galaxy. And the galaxy, despite all its initial horror and fear, was beginning to understand that maybe this was exactly what they needed. Monsters that fought for them instead of against them. The storm was coming. But for the first time in galactic history, everyone faced it together. And together, they just might survive.